I would have to go back to 78 and 79 and 1980 when I was go-kart driving as a teammate for Fullerton, named Fullerton. He was very experienced and I enjoyed very much that driving with him because he was fast, he was consistent. He was for me a very complete driver and it was pure driving, pure racing. I have that as a very good memory.
So everyone, thank you very much for tuning in to the School of Sen, our first podcast. And yeah, as our first guest, it doesn't get much better than the legendary Terry Fullerton. Now, Terry's someone who needs absolutely no introduction in the world of motorsport. I've worked with Terry myself. In fact, that trophy you see just there is one of the trophies we won together at the 2011 Karting World Champs, where I led for most of the race, but unfortunately was edged by a certain Charles Leclerc. But, you know, the few races I worked with Terry, hugely influential in my career. And yeah, as you can see, the spoilers are right behind me of what we managed to achieve together. So I know Terry's insight, I know his intellect and his knowledge and love for the sport. So I really can't wait to share that with you. So Terry, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, how's everything going your end?
Well, we're all locked down, aren't we? So, you know, just in the house a lot, looking out the window a fair bit, watching lots of box sets on TV, reading books, which I haven't done for a long, long time, and enjoying that enormously, actually. Yeah. Yeah, that's it, really. Just waiting, you know, twiddling my fingers, waiting to get back out and karting again.
And still looking forward to getting back to the track?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Missed it quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think everyone is sort of desperate for racing to restart again, and hopefully it won't be too long before then. But you know, let's talk back. Let's go back to the very start of your career. Obviously, everyone knows who you are, either from your own racing exploits, from being a part of the karting and motorsport world, or from that famous part of the Senna movie, where I think you got probably the biggest endorsement a driver could ever get from the legend that he was. How did your career start? You know, where was the beginning point where you really fell in love with motorsport?
The bit where I fell in love with motorsport, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and I had an elder brother who was racing motorbikes, or just started racing motorbikes. And we used to go along, or got sort of dragged along with him. Well, I didn't actually get dragged along. I wanted to go. So, yeah, we went along with him to the testing and the racing. And got the bug then, the smell of Castrol, the sound of the bike, the excitement, the nerves, that sort of stuff got into my blood at quite a young age with motorbikes to start with. And unfortunately, he was killed on his bike at Mallory Park in 1964. So at the time, I was hoping to go on and race bikes myself. I was 11 years old. And that, you know, I decided I wanted to race bikes when I got older and so forth. But my parents, especially my dad, you know, basically said that wasn't going to happen. And he kind of steered us towards karts. And you could actually race a kart at 12 years old when I was a kid. Now it's much younger, but then that was considered pretty young. And I think it was the only form of motorsport you could race at 12 years old. A little later, I think maybe schoolboy scrambling and motorbikes came in. But at the time, go-karts you could race at 12 years old. So that's it. Dad bought us I think a faster kart McCulloch, which is pretty, you know, is a proper antique piece now. Yeah. But you know, it probably did 40 or 50 mile an hour. I can't remember how it handled. I don't remember at all. But we used to go and practice on that, and basically that's how I became involved. We moved up. We bought a better kart. I can remember buying a Zip kart with a BA Perilla about 1965. From Mark Hines at Zip Cars, who were based in Finchley in London at the time. And then we started going to Rye House and Tilbury and some of the southwest kart tracks like Clay Pigeon and a few others down that way that aren't there anymore, I don't think. But yeah, just basically started like that. And my dad was pretty enthusiastic about it, prepared the equipment, got it all ready. And I absolutely loved it. You know, probably the best memories I have from karting are from that time, the excitement and you know, a genuine, real love for driving a go-kart. So.
Oh, that's lovely. The sort of question I think I've always wanted to ask you, but I never really got the chance to. Were you always quick? I mean, you know, I got lapped in my first karting race. I definitely didn't have the natural ability straight away, put it that way. But did you just get in and did it feel natural to you, or was it something you had to really work?
Yeah, looking back, the first months of driving a car, I wasn't quick enough to win races.
Yeah.
But I think I came second in my first ever race, and I think I won my second race. So I was kind of on the pace fairly good. The competition back at that stage where we were racing wasn't particularly tough. We kept away from Rye House, which was kind of the hotbed of karting at that stage, where people like Mickey Allen and Bobby Day, Dave Salomon, Glenn Beer, those sort of people. I don't know whether you know any of those names, but they were racing at Rye in the senior classes, and there was some very good juniors there as well. One I remember was called Johnny May, and there were some other guys there. So we kept away from Rye because that was a bit too competitive. We actually went and raced down in the southwest to Clay and places like that, where there were still some reasonable drivers. And then we came back to race at Rye a little bit later. But I think the honest answer was I was reasonably quick straight away, yeah, and kind of went on and developed from there.
Yeah, so. And then people will have a very good idea of where you ended up, and then the years in between from where you started to where you sort of ended up becoming a multiple world champion, and obviously recognized one of the best karters there's ever been. Tell us more about the story in between there and really how you did it. That's the thing I want to know is how did you take yourself from someone with no experience to one of the best in the world, and what did you do differently compared to everyone else that made you stand out?
I don't think there's only one thing we did differently. My dad was fairly focused and was pretty good at preparing the equipment, and luckily enough we could afford to do it reasonably well. He was only a school teacher, but he used all his disposable income to go karting, and I won the first British Junior Championship I did, and that kind of set me on a path. I don't know, I was enjoying it enormously. I love driving karts. I suppose around about 12 or 13, I'd already decided that I wanted to be a professional kart driver, to actually earn my living as a kart driver, not a motor racing driver, a kart driver. And there wasn't anybody doing that at the time, not really. There were one or two guys in Italy that drove for factories, but there was no one actually being a professional kart driver as there is today and later on. So I kind of had a bit of a dream very young, and I think that actually became an important thing, that focus you have on one thing. And my one thing at the time was to be a professional driver. Later that turned or developed into also wanting to be world champion. So I had a focus on that from very young, probably 15 or thereabouts. I thought, I'd love to win the world championship, and that kind of became a goal for the next 4 or 5 years. And we all had that, my father and my brother and myself, we collectively had that goal of becoming or trying to win the world championship. And I think it was, that was one of the things that inspired. We made decisions and did things based on that one goal we were trying to achieve. That's about as close as I can get to saying that any one thing that might have made a difference. It was that dream, that goal of being world champion. Yeah. And all our karting decisions from about the age of 15 or 16 were based on that one goal. So, and then we just, my dad was loyal and he wanted to stay with zip karts when I was 15, 16. But there were actually other karts out there that were better than a zip kart at the time. And myself and my brother wanted to change, not because we didn't get on really well with the zip people, Mark Hines and Martin Hines, especially Mark, the father, who was running things completely at the time. But we decided to take the selfish route, if you want, and went onto the better car, which was a Barlotti at the time, made by Jack Barlow down in Reading, and got quite a following now in the historic kart scene. But anyway, we drove a Barlotti then, and actually went better. And it was driving the Barlotti that I first started to compete at the front in European level. And then a little bit later on, in order to get the best engines from my army, from Mr. Grana and my army, we changed to a Birrell car, which I'm still involved with Birrell today. So it's quite strange to be thinking that I was involved with them back in 1972. It's now 2020, and I'm still involved with Birrell. But anyway, we changed from a Barlotti to a Birrell not long before I won the World Championship. And that was a decision also made. So, you know, the car was at least as good as the Barlotti, we thought. And it gave us access to the best factory engines because Birrell were connected with our army at the time and they were helping each other. So we were selfish about it. And, and as a driver, I was selfish. And I think, you could call it focused, you could call it dedicated. But, being selfish and doing what's best for you was also part of getting to the top, and then hopefully staying at the top for a few years. So you can't be, I couldn't be, friendly and happy with everybody, and trying to make people enjoy my company. I was very tunnel vision motivated, only really concerned about getting the result. So I think that frame of mind, that mindset also, I think the situation made us have that mindset. So, and then once you got that mindset and you actually see, it's working, you're going in the right direction, things, that kind of takes over. And we were fairly driven, fairly one directional about where we were going.
So that's an intense amount of self-confidence. And I think, as you've seen from all the drivers you've worked with and also from yourself, that self-confidence is hugely important in a driver's success. The drivers, they won't be successful, they won't rally a team around them. Was that self-confidence something that came naturally, or was there just a point in your career where you thought, hang on a minute, I can be a world champion, I can achieve my goals? Or was it something that you worked on and chipped away at? Was it there?
Well, quite early on as a driver, I learned to be self-critical and self-analytical. I used to analyse the way I was driving. I used to analyse my races in my own mind after the race, maybe in the evening or a day or so later. And I would criticise myself. So I'd be my own, I'd be my strongest critic to work out and to admit what I'd done wrong or what I could do better. And the mindset of most racers, especially young racers, is that if they're not quick enough or they're not fast enough, or something, they blame the equipment, or nowadays they might blame the team or the equipment or the setup. But I never did that. I was completely honest, and if I'd made mistakes or there was something I thought I could do better, then I would go about working on that one problem. I'd leave the stuff I thought I did well, or the stuff I thought I was good at, okay, I've just left that in place. That's great. Okay, now what can I work on to improve? And there was always something to work on, always something, mentally, or maybe with equipment, or maybe with setup, or maybe with just the planning that you had for the race. There's always something. And so we learned fast, or I learned fast. My father, my brother, and myself, we learned quickly what were the requirements to perform at your best, and then I think if you do that and you have a certain amount of ability and you have dedication and you're prepared to work pretty hard at it, once you get that mindset and you actually go well, and maybe you win a race, and winning that race gives you a confidence that nothing else will give you. You can do it. You've just done it. You've won a race. You're going to go on and win the next one, and that kind of builds. You kind of put yourself on the up escalator. You've done things right, you've been self-analytical, you've decided what things you can work on to improve, you've done that, you've improved on those things, you've won a race, or you've improved your position, you've maybe finished third, that's the best you've ever done. Then that gives you the confidence to go on and do the same or better the next time. And it's very important to have that kind of direction building in a driver's mind, and teams as well. Everyone is working in the sport. That's very important to have that, not just blame other things. Oh, it wasn't me, or try and buy a faster engine or this, that, and the other. You know, it's not about that. It's about getting the whole thing together, learning from your mistakes, and being honest about your mistakes, and then working on them, improving them, moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. You know, one of the things that I'm really interested in discussing as well is let's call it the world championship mentality, because I do believe that, like you said, with enough natural talent, dedication, and, you know, the right work ethic, you have a very high chance of being successful and achieving a dream or ambition of being a world champion. Obviously now where we look at it in karting, world championships tend to be held over multiple rounds. Wasn't like that sort of back in the day. Even when I was racing, it was a one-off weekend. Just sort of, let's go into a bit more of the psychology of performing in that one-off race weekend. And, you know, a lot of drivers, they suffer from fear of failure. They suffer from, as you already said, you know, not being maybe self-critical enough and not necessarily being analytical enough of where they lose it. But I think the ability to be able to handle pressure on one weekend is something that a lot of drivers really struggle with. How did you manage to, keep yourself focused, keep yourself in that performance zone and, you know, perform and win world championships as a result of
it? Through hard work, I think. That part of it didn't come natural to me. I'm not sure that comes natural to anybody. I guess it does some people, but it didn't come natural to me to be able to focus completely on winning and shut out all the things that didn't matter or weren't going to help you win. So I had to learn that process. I had to learn how to control my emotions. And I did that through, you know, as a junior, really. I did that as a 13, 14, 15-year-old. And I always had this thing that I wanted to win. But if I was in the lead of a race, of a final, say a British Championship or something like that, I wasn't happy just to win by, 10 metres or whatever. I wanted to win. I wanted to pull in away from the guy, and I wanted to win by as far as possible. And that was always the goal. Didn't really just want to win and no more. And then the other thing about it is, not to rest on your laurels after that. I self-analysed everything that I did in the race after, even winning big races, to see what I could do to improve for the future. And like I say, there were always things that you could improve on, always things that I could improve on, whether they were psychological or equipment centred or whatever. So, sorry, what was the original question? I've gone off at a bit of a tangent.
So it's basically when you're in that zone, when you're fighting for a world championship, when all the pressure's there, how did you keep yourself in a mindset where you were able to perform?
It was really, it's really just developing tunnel vision. And that's what I did. I was really only interested in, thinking, interacting, talking with somebody, if it was part of the plan, if it was going to help win the race. Otherwise, I treated it as a distraction. So, I was known as very antisocial, and I didn't befriend people because that had no part in helping me win races. In fact, I found them distractions. Friendships and acquaintances and chats with people at the track was something that I decided very early on that I didn't want to do, because I found them distractions, and didn't help my results at all.
Yeah.
So I've got a name for being pretty antisocial and a bit of a whatever.
Yeah, I like it.
Can we swear on here? Am I going to swear? Am I allowed to swear? Because I like to swear.
We can edit it out. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We'll just say.
I was known as. And that, you know what? It didn't bother me at all. In fact, I quite liked it.
Yeah, you know what?
That was good. It was like thinking of me as and that would do.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think every driver has to find their way, don't they?
Yeah. But most of the very successful people in karting that I know also had exactly that same mindset. I know Mike Wilson did. I know a guy called Francois Goldstein did. I did. Senna would develop it and go on, and you'd see it in cars very much. And you saw the beginnings of him developing it in karting as well at the time. So I don't know anybody that was mega successful in karting that didn't have that mindset.
Yeah.
So, you know, slightly varying degrees of it, but, you know, they all had it, you know.
Yeah.
But Mike Wilson took no prisoners. He won a lot of world championships in 135, and he would, you know, he took no prisoners at all when he didn't need to. And Francois Goldstein was the same, even perhaps more so. Between them, I think they won about 11 world championships, just between the two of them.
Fairly decent number, that, isn't it?
That's right, isn't it? Yeah, Mike won 6, and I think Francois Goldstein won 5.
Well,
so you know, and they were a certain part of their personality at the track in racing was away from the track, and, you know, different thing altogether. And I was always away from the track. I was a different person. So, but there we go. You need a bit of editing there, I feel.
you know what? No, I like it. It's we can censor that.
No, I'm not going to say that Mike and Francois they weren't really, but it's the attitude. It's the way they were. It was the only one thing mattered. That was winning, and whatever they needed to do to win, they were going to do it. As long as they could, you know, it was within inside the rules, or they could get away with it, you know.
Yeah.
So, and they were both, you know, especially Mr. Goldstein was very good at, you know, getting away with things. And he did some pretty naughty things in his career, but got away with them.
Yeah.
And fair enough, he won a lot of world championships, and he was, you know, he was the guy that I looked up to when I had this vision about being world champion, or this dream of being world champion. He was world champion at the time, back in like 68 and 69 and 70, the years before I won the world championship in 73. So he was kind of the guy that, you know, that I looked up to and admired and thought was, you know, brilliant at what he did. So no one knew why he was so quick. He was so good, you know, this guy. So and he was an exceptional driver. So. Yeah. He was my idol at the time.
That's kind of a nice lead on to the next thing of who is the most complete driver you've ever raced against or ever seen come through the ranks of karting?
Oh dear, another big one.
Go on, pick one.
Complete driver. It'd be easier to pick like a slightly different category. Like, who is the best driver that I ever saw that never really went on to win a world championship or something like that? That would be Alessandro Zanardi.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah. He was stunningly good in the go-kart, that fella. Really, really exceptional driver. And he never won a world championship. I think he did win a few big races, but he moved to cars quite early on. I know he won Hong Kong one year in a few races. But he was incredibly good in the go-kart. There was a lot of time for that guy. And you can see by, you know, what he did after karting, after his accident, what a determined and focused bloke he is, you know. I don't know whether you know much about him, but, you know, he's unbelievable determination. And they're important qualities, you know, that you need to succeed at the top in anything. Yeah. Mike Wilson was a great all-round driver. You can't take any of that away from Mike. He was brilliant as well. Francois Goldstein, also exceptional driver, very clever at sorting out his equipment as well. You know, one of those people that had cultivated the art of, you know, believing he should win, and something was wrong with the world if he wasn't winning. He was very good at that too, you know. Like I say, all the guys I know that won a lot had that quality. Actually, Mike had it. I think I had it. Goldstein had it. Senna certainly developed it and had it. Although it came really when he moved from karting to cars. I think he cut his teeth and learned quite a lot of stuff in karting. Yeah. But then developed the art of being a, you know what, a bit later on. Yeah. I don't mean that really, but do you know what I mean? The mindset.
Yeah, it's
one thing matters. You know, winning matters above all else, and nothing else comes close. Yeah. So everything is thought about in those terms.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, you sort of came back on the map a little bit for the whole motorsport world when the Senna movie was released, and there was that nice sort of, you know, endorsement from him at the end there. Mm. What was it really like racing against him, being in the same team? You know, take the movie sort of, if you want to call it movie onyx to the side. What was it really like being a teammate with Senna?
It was interesting. He was a great teammate because he was so fast and, you know, pushed so hard. With Ayrton, it was like he arrived in Italy and became my teammate, when he was 17. So the years when he was 17, 18 and 19 were the years when we were in the same team and the DAP team. And so he was very different at 17 than he was at 19. At 17, he was, you know, a quick, gifted boy who wasn't a man at that stage. And by the time he was 19, he was a man, and he developed the art of being fast in the car, very much so. And you know, running right at the front of races at that point. He had really by the end of 79, but in 1980, he was really bloody good, you know, so very good by that stage. But, you know, as far as being in a team with him, the beginning of the 3-year period, it was like, you know, this nice kid had come along, and we were in, you know, we'd eat together in restaurants, and we were all staying in the same hotels for testing and racing. And I remember we raced in Japan that year, and we were all in the same hotel. I remember having like water fights in the hotel with him and the DAP guys and my mechanics. And it was just a happy team, you know. By the time, you know, 1980 had come along, it was different. He didn't want to work under the same awning as me, so we had separate awnings.
Really?
Same team basically, but separate awnings. And when I beat him at the 1980 Champions Cup, or the Coppa dei Campioni, they call it in Italy, in Jesolo, I beat him. I passed him on the last lap and beat him in that race. And from that point onwards, it was, you know, I was enemy number one. And so our relationship completely fell apart at that stage. And then that would be running him a different part of the pits to me even. And I had my own team. I was running myself at that stage, but still under the DAP umbrella, if you know what I mean. So.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, you're probably one of the few people who actually managed to race him wheel to wheel. Where was his weakness? I mean, every driver has a weakness. Having worked with you myself, I know your ability to be able to find a driver's weakness and then tell them how to exploit it is exceptional from first hand. So, you know, what was that one area where you look back and you go, that was the place where I knew I was better than him and I could always exploit it if the opportunity came?
I think it was his inexperience showed at the beginning. You know, there was inexperience at, you know, competing against, you know, very good drivers. And you know, beating very good drivers. I think he come from a background in South America where he was the best driver and the fastest driver, and used to win races on that. Or the last year or so of his racing in South America was like that, I'm pretty sure. Where when he came to Europe, there was a plethora of very good drivers, like Mike Wilson and Stefano Modena and myself and Peter De Bruin and Tony Zorzo and Lars Forsman, and you know, there were 10 or 12 exceptionally good drivers, and he was competing on a different level. And in order to win or be right at the front of that level, you needed to be doing the whole thing right. Your testing had to be right. You obviously had to be on the right equipment and carts. Well, he was on good equipment. He was on equipment that was good enough to be run at the front for sure. And it was really just, he didn't have the experience to control the testing properly so that everything got done in the right order, and the team didn't manage to do that too well at the time either, and so really, you know, the only thing I could point to at the time, especially early on in our relationship, was inexperience, and he was driven by passion as well. He was a more passionate person and driver than I was. So he always wanted to see the time. You know, he wanted to do the best time in practice, be the fastest in qualifying, win all the heats. You know, he wanted to win everything. So sometimes there's a time when it's, you know, it's not the most important thing to be the fastest, to be the quickest. Yeah. He hadn't learned that system quite at that time. He hadn't learned to. He used to get a little panicked when he wasn't fast enough, or he'd get upset as well. So if I put it on pole and I was a couple of cents quicker than he was, it would rattle him a bit. He would be rattled. So he had to learn to control that sort of stuff. And he obviously did. You know, he got much better at that. So, and you got to remember, I was 25 at the time. I was a pretty rounded driver. You know, I'd been around a lot. I'd done a lot of big races. I had quite a lot of experience. Whereas Ayrton was he was a rookie as a driver in top international level. So, and you know, that obviously that showed a little bit in his first year. But by the last year, he'd more or less, you know, got that all sorted, and he was a hell of a driver in the last year, 1980.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty detailed analysis there, and probably the best I've ever heard of that as well. So thank you very much for that. You know, going back to that, before we sort of move on to the years following, what would you say was your best race you've ever done in karting? You know, closest battle, dominating out front. What's one race you'd love to pinpoint and say, that's the best I've ever driven, it was a perfect race? Or did that not exist for you?
The 1980 Champions Cup at Jesolo, the one where I beat Ayrton, because it was a funny format, the race that year. If I remember rightly, it was they did a set of races on the Saturday where they did time practice and 2 finals on the Saturday, and then they did time practice and 2 finals on the Sunday, I think. But they certainly took, on both days, they took time practice as one of the things you had to count. So if you came first in time practice, you got 0 points. If you came second, you got 2. Came third, you got 3, and so on, penalty points. And then they took, you were allowed to drop your worst position in one of the finals, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
So I think I polled it on both days, actually. I think I was on pole on both days. But the first day, certainly, I remember having problems in the first final. And I think I finished something like 7th. And he may well have won that race, I can't remember. And then in the second final, I did a little better. I had some problems, I sorted them out. I think you started in your finishing position. I started 7th and finished 3rd. And then on the Sunday, I polled it again. And Ayrton was 4th or 5th, I think. And there were some excellent drivers between me and him, like De Bruin and Jesolo and Lars Forsman, Mike Wilson, people like that. And then that meant that things were getting pretty close between me and Ayrton, and other people had kind of fallen by the wayside. And by the end of the second final, if you dropped my worst position, which was probably that race, the second final on Sunday, because I know something went wrong, and he dropped his worst race, we were more or less tied on points going to the last final. I think he was 1 point ahead of me, or it worked out that whoever finished in front of the other one was going to win the championship, the Champions Cup, which was a big deal in those days. Yeah. It was really just second only to the World Championships in people's minds, and it was a very highly rated race to win. So we started the race, like the last final, it was something pretty intense, like a 30-lap final around Jesolo in about 85, 90 degrees. It was very physical track in those days. Because of the amount of grip and rubber on the track, rubber used to build up 2 or 3 inches around the corners. And I've got photos of me. You had to 2-wheel around the corners. There was no option. You know, you couldn't drive around the corners. No. It had to be a 2-wheel. So around the hairpins, 2 or 3 of the hairpins, 2-wheeling, running right over the curbs was the fastest way because there was less drag. And anyway, very physical. He shot off until because I think he used new tyres again. He'd used quite a lot of new tyres. I don't think I did use tyres. I used slightly worn tyres for whatever reason. I can't remember. And he shot off into the lead, and I eventually got into second after about 7 or 8 laps. I think I passed Lars Forsman. But Ayrton had gone at this stage. He was like half a hairpin length away from me. So as I was going into one of the first hairpin, I could see him coming out the second hairpin. Yeah. So on the straight, that would have equated to about 100 metres or 80 metres or something like that. But gradually, as the race wore on, by about lap 15 or 16, I just settled into coming second mode. And I basically, you know, he was going to win it. He's too far ahead. But he started to slow, and I didn't slow. So by about lap 20 of the 30-lap final, I think it was 30 laps, I realised that there's a good chance I might just catch him right at the end of the race. So I kept slogging away and trying to put in as fast a lap as I could every single time. He obviously could see me coming. I didn't notice him making any mistakes. There were no big gains on any one particular lap, but slowly I was working away at him. And then with about 3 laps to go, I thought, I'm definitely going to catch him here on the last lap. And I do remember feeling like I wanted to vomit. The effort was pretty high. The exertion rate was pretty high, and the heat, etc., and the grip and all that. And I managed not quite to vomit in my helmet and kept it fully lit. and I caught him coming on the straight on the last lap. So the last lap board comes out, and I've come up on him, and he obviously knows I'm there, and he blocked to the inside on the start and finish straight. So there's no way past up the inside on the start and finish straight into the first corner, which is a very fast right-hand corner, Jesolo. So I shot to the outside of the track, and then we kind of swapped over on the apex of the corner, and he ran just a wee bit wide, and I managed to get my front wheels inside him, going down to the first hairpin. He closed all the way into the first hairpin, and I was coming in as well, and I was just gaining slightly up the inside. We both went into the corner, probably both too quick, and we touched, and he went on two wheels a little bit. I managed to make the corner and get round and get out of the corner. And I looked round a couple of corners later, and he was 8 or 10 metres behind, and I knew all I really needed to do was keep everything neat and tidy, and I won the race and the championship, which I did. Wow. You know, so that was probably the best race. Looking back, that's probably the best race. Even at the time, I remember thinking, oh, that was brilliant. That was the best race I've ever done. It was very, very hard, very tough, very physical, very, very, very taxing race to win, very, very tough race to win. So I didn't see Ayrton for quite a while after that, but I know he was seriously pissed off at her. It was a completely legitimate move, the overtake, although a lot of people have tried to say it wasn't since then, but it was a completely legitimate overtake. I've got no doubts about that whatsoever. And that was it. I won the championship. I think that's my best race ever, the one that I remember, the one that sticks out now. Of course, that became a much bigger deal, that particular race, later on when the film came out, and that'd be part of the reason that he was motivated to say what he did about me in the film, I'm sure. So that was a great race. I remember some other races as well, winning that were really tough. I remember losing some races that I should have won, that were probably the toughest ones of all to take. A world championship I lost when I won the first final. I was in the lead of the second final. The engine blew up with 7 laps to go, and I had like a 100-metre lead or something. That was awful. That one, if I think about that one now, that was at Nivelles in 1980. I still get a sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach, believe it or not. And that's 40 years later.
Wow.
So that one, I was ill after that race. It made me ill, you know, the disappointment. And wow. So, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. That's got me a little bit speechless, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just so nice to hear that, and also still.
Alan, you'll never speechless, mate. Don't give me that one.
Yeah, true. I'll give you that. You know me well enough to know that that's never the case. You got me as close as it will ever get. Yeah, that's about as close as I'm probably ever going to get to being there, and imagining it. And I think every driver that is potentially watching this or has ever done it, that last lap, catch someone down, win on the last lap of the race, it always makes it more special, doesn't it? To hear,
not so good for Ayrton or whoever comes second in that situation. It's quite crushing for them, obviously.
Yeah.
Especially in that situation, it was a build-up over 2 days of qualifying and racing, and it came down to that last lap overtake.
That's amazing.
And that was after each day there was something like 70 laps of racing.
Wow. I
think I might have that wrong, but they were certainly long finals in very hot, tough, hard conditions.
Wow. Yeah.
The speed you could go around some of the corners in Jesolo, actually, the speed you could go around some of the corners was really down to how well you could hold on to the car. So it was that physical and that tough.
And you know, obviously now driver fitness is something that's widely important, and you see drivers training 5-6 times a week, and it's just something embedded in the culture. Was it something then back then that was quite as big, or was it just drive the kart, you'll get kart fit and away you go?
Not really, no, it wasn't. They didn't, it wasn't common for everyone to have like training programs and fitness programs. It wasn't common for that. I mean, I used to keep fit by playing squash, so I was reasonably aerobically fit and strong. And then the way that I kept, race fit, muscle-wise and strength-wise for karting was we did lots of testing. So, from between, say, March and September or October each year, there would never be a week where there wasn't 2 days I was at the track, doing somewhere between 100 and 150 laps each day, testing karts, testing engines, testing carbs, testing bits and pieces either before races or going to Italy to test that the local tracks we used to test out there. So we did a lot of laps testing, and people like Mike Wilson, all those guys, and Ayrton, when he came to Europe, also did loads of testing as well. So it was testing, really, driving the go-kart that was our fitness regime, if you like to say.
Yeah, proper kart fitness rather than...
Yeah, because, I mean, you're using all the muscles, you're using the muscles you're going to use. Yeah. If you do it in the gym, you have to actually target those places, don't you? So, and yeah. So
there we are. Well, sort of, we've heard about the best race. Now, if I can sort of take you back to the less nice side of your career, what's we had a bit of a conversation about it sort of off camera, but I'd quite like to know what are the bits that you regret in your career, where you've made mistakes, and sort of like a bit of advice to your younger self that you wish that you could go and give back.
Yeah, I was I won the World Championship in '73, which was the big pinnacle of my career at the time. It was what we always wanted to do. It was always our direction to try and win that. That's I mean, when I say I mean my father, my brother, and myself, who were kind of a team at the time. And after that, I got a little bit lost. My dad kind of dropped out of helping us because there was nothing else to achieve as far as he was concerned. And I understood that, I sympathised with that, but I didn't want to stop racing. I wanted to keep racing because I still loved it. So I made some not such great decisions about teams and equipment based on the fact that I thought I could probably win on anything. And I was wrong. I couldn't win on anything. And there was certainly a period of between 1980 and 1984 when I stopped racing in '84, where I wasn't on the best equipment. I couldn't get on the best equipment. And my results definitely suffered because of that, But I was a professional driver. It was how I earned my living. It was how I paid my mortgage, etc., etc. And I did have one at the time. So I had to be paid to drive, and the options that I had to be paid to drive, the equipment wasn't really good enough to win. And no matter how hard we worked to try and develop the equipment, we never managed to get it at the point where it was capable of winning on a consistent basis. I won a few races, but not enough. I couldn't compete with the Birrell or Cali kart, which was CRG in those days. Couldn't compete with the Birrell Cali kart Dunlop Comet combination that was 1, 2, 3 in so many of the world championships at that time. And the crucial thing was the engine, was the Comet engine, was by far the best 135 engine. And that never came up with an engine that can compete, and nor did PCR come up with an engine that could really compete. So, and I could have, if I'd been nicer and more sensible and more professional in my relationships with people in the late '70s, I would have had the option to have been on that equipment. But because I'd, blotted my copybook, in particular with IAME and Mr. Grana, I wasn't able to get on that equipment. So I would have made some different choices like that. I should really have gone where the equipment was best always, whereas I made conscious decisions to go where I knew the equipment wasn't good enough, but I was going to get paid if I went somewhere else. So I think in retrospect, I'd have been better off, taking a massive wage cut and going to the superior equipment and the better teams at the time. Yeah. That's about it, really. So like some bad decision making, really, I'd say.
Yeah. So. I think kind of shows the importance of every little decision you make, and you're sort of preaching to someone who's sat the other side of what is still an ongoing career, but a career that could have been very, very different. Maybe some potentially different decisions. So,
but sometimes you make a decision based on all the best information you have and all the best background information you have at the time, and it still goes wrong. But that's not what I'm talking about. I actively made decisions to not drive the best equipment, but to drive equipment that I knew wasn't as good because I was going to get paid. I could have still earned some money with the better equipment, but it would have been a more restricted thing.
Was it just the money though, or was there like another motivation behind it? Was it, I know I can win on it, so I'm going to take the money and I'm going to go and win? Yeah,
that was it. I had that attitude. I thought I could win on the equipment I decided to go on, even though I knew at the time it wasn't good enough to win or compete. So I thought, we can test, we can develop, we can do this, and we'll get there. But it didn't work out that way.
Yeah. Wow.
So there we go.
Yeah.
I lived and learned, but the only problem was at the end of that, because of the 135 situation and a few other bits and pieces in my personal life and this, that, and the other, I gave up at the end of '84. Yeah. Whereas I may have continued for a few more years after that if things had been a little bit different. But yeah. There was no light at the end of the tunnel as far as competitive equipment and being paid to use the competitive equipment. There was no light at the end of the tunnel on that score at all. So I gave up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, as you said, decision making is a key in any driver's career. So it's
absolutely, yeah.
And now, sort of taking it further forward now, obviously '84, you've stopped racing. Where does Terry go after that? What's your direction path? Because obviously 2020 you're still heavily involved in karting, as you said. You've got the Fullerton kart, which is running obviously to a very successful level as well, with some very, very fast drivers. And, still coaching. You coached myself, you've coached other drivers onto world championships as well. So where did that sort of journey take you to end up here today?
After I stopped racing, I moved from London, which was a mistake. But I moved from London to the Midlands, and I bought a house up there, and I started a small business getting karts made by a local guy called Peter Elliott. The company was Mellors Elliott, based in Sheffield, a little engineering company, and they made some go-karts for me, which were the very first Fullerton karts. And in '85, '86, '87, I did that. I tried to develop that. into a profitable business. Yeah. It didn't end up that way. It didn't turn into a profitable business. But in the meantime, in '86 and '87, I ran a little fella. A smashing driver called Alan McNeish. You probably heard of him. He did pretty well in Le Mans.
Once or twice, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent little driver, very, very fast, smashing little driver. And I say little because he really was quite little. I'm not belittling him as a driver in any way at all. He's quite a small guy. But so in '85 or '86, I can't remember, I think it was '86 and '87, I ran Alan. And he was very successful, won the British Junior Championship in '86, won the British Senior Championship in '87. I think I've got my dates right. And the sum total of that was he won that on my kart with engines that I prepared myself. And out of our little team, he won those. And the sum total of that was, I think I sold about 5 karts either year, or 8 karts, or virtually nothing. It made no difference, or seemed to make no difference. It couldn't turn, a kart producing company into a profit-making kart producing company. It did nothing on that level at all. So fairly disappointingly, at the end of '87, or maybe it was in '88, I kind of packed that up and gave it up. And there were some personal things in my life that time. My life got turned a little bit upside down one way or the other. Eventually started coaching again in '89 with Ralph Furman. And that was a good bit of my life. I enjoyed that a lot, helping Ralph. I helped him for 4 years. And ran the whole show. Got a nice little setup with a trailer and an awning and a Jeep, and I made all the decisions. I did all that. I ran him. I driver coached him. He also won the British Junior Championship in '90. I think he won that. He won the British Senior Championship in '92. Did well in Europe too, on the podium in European Championship against very good guys. So that was a good 4 years of my life, very enjoyable 4 years of my life, with running Ralph Furman and coaching him. And then it moved on, and I did Mike Simpson. I ran Mike Simpson in '93. He ran the British Championship that year, as far as I remember, the Senior British Championship. Yeah. Went on to do very well in Europe, on the podium in Europe several times. Mid-90s was when I got my kart made by PCR. I got another kart made. Went back into it again. Got a kart made by PCR in Italy, yeah, which was actually welded and put together by the Parolin company for PCR, and then I was the final sort of customer. But it was kind of to my design, and that was a very good kart. That was an excellent kart, and started a business in Thetford in Norfolk, And that went pretty well. We got up to selling nearly 500 carts in the best year.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty different. But I had high overheads. I was running a team in Europe. I was running Anthony Davidson, and the guy who worked for me, Dean Panruck. I ran him for a while.
Yeah.
But that went pretty well, that business. But by the end of the 90s, I kind of ran out of steam a little bit. And also my personal life, things weren't great. I had some problems there. So one way or the other, I decided to we've actually been out racing in the Philippines and the Far East a few times. And I decided that I'd go out and give it a shot living out in the Philippines for a while. So I did that at the end of the 90s. And so I packed up, sold up the business in England, sold all the assets of my little business in Thetford, vans and tools and awnings and all sorts of things, sold all that and moved out to the Philippines. And I driver coached out there. I still had a connection with my cart being produced, and they were still being sold around the world. And I was still earning a percentage of every cart that was sold around the world. So, and I was selling quite well in America, over 100 carts I was selling in America per year, and this, that, and the other. So I still kept that connection, but I did driver coaching in the Philippines and the Far East for that period of time, and eventually ended up. At that time, I was coming and going. I come back to England. I ran Ricky Christodoulou in Europe, and I ran. Yeah, Ricky. He went really fast as well. He was so fast at that time. It was 2000 and I think 2004, 5 and 6 I ran Ricky. 2004, I think that was it. And in the last year, he was, in 2006, he was the quickest, you know. He'd be faster than Ardigo and all those guys. He was an incredibly fast driver. Ended up coming second in the European Championship. He should have won it, but he got knocked off in the final in Germany. And it restarted, and eventually something went wrong with the engine, I believe. But so he came second in the championship, and Ardigo won it. And then after Ricky, who did I run then? I ran. Oh, that's right. I lived in the Philippines full time then, and ran an American Filipina girl called Alessandra Madrigal. That was quite an interesting period of my life. 3 years living there. Yeah. I was married and had a kid by then. Jenny was born in 2005, so I had a kid out there. Growing up in the Philippines and bringing up a kid in the Philippines was something else. Yeah. And anyway, the people that I was involved with then, Mr. Madrigal and company, were very interesting people to work for. And Alexandra went very well. She raced in America a lot, so I was back and forwards to America from the Philippines, coaching and organising her racing for her. That all went pretty well. And then at the end of 2009, came back to Europe again and settled here a wee bit. Worked for Racing Steps Foundation and ran Jake Dennis, 2010. Yeah, I believe that was.
Yeah, that was my first year racing.
And then 2011 was when I started to help you, I believe, about midway through 2011. Would that be right?
Yeah. 11, I had quite a strong start to the year in 11. I won the first 2 or 3 rounds of the British Champs, was winning races in Europe and WSK. Everything was going really well. We were fighting against Verstappen, Ocon, Leclerc, Gasly, all the...
There's some big names there, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, there were some pretty fast people, and that's just naming a few, And then middle of the season, I don't really know what happened, to be honest with you. I think, combination of what we spoke about before, a little bit of, I would say, pressure getting to me because there was a genuine chance. I was leading WSK, I was leading the British Championships, and this was still only my 3rd year in racing. And then, towards the back end of the year, I think it was just before our Super 1, you and my dad got put in contact, and you agreed to sort of work with me for a couple of rounds in the build up to the World Champs. And I still remember that Rara weekend, the Friday, being 1.5 seconds off in the rain. And it was just abysmal. It was so bad. And you sort of taking me to the side and going, you know what? Like, it's a miracle you're 1.5 seconds off because your braking technique is so bad. This is the way you should do it. Stop doing that. Do this. And the first final I won by 15 seconds, I think it was. And the second final I got knocked off and still finished second, 2 tenths behind the leader. So, we talk about the confidence. And that was, I think, 2 races before the World Champs at Sarno. And that was like the confidence moment where I was like, oh, maybe I haven't forgotten how to drive. It was just that small change that you managed to instill. And all of a sudden, life was right again, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember that as well. Yeah, that's I enjoyed those races. They were great races, and a real shame at the World Championship. You know, I think a win was on there, but it didn't quite happen. But there we go. Second's still pretty impressive in the World Championship, and to be beaten by your man, you know, is no disgrace whatsoever. And I think some very decent names just behind you as well.
Well, so, I still remember in the race. So, start of the race, we started 5th. Weren't necessarily the quickest in the pre-final, but again, you'd worked a bit of magic. You know, Ricky obviously worked a bit of magic as well, and we'd gone into it. But we actually had our engines stolen on the Tuesday of the race weekend. Ula, One Engines, had his van nicked by...
Oh, that's right, yeah. I remember
whoever it was. So that didn't obviously put us in the best position. But yeah, the pre-final, finished 5th, started 5th for the final, made a mega start. You know, again, little bit of guidance from yourself and Ricky there about getting the run, and dive bombed Esteban Ocon, which caused a fight between Leclerc, Ocon and Verstappen and gave me like a 1 second gap.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
Led for 9 of the 15 laps, I think it was. But, you know, that weekend, I think Charles broke the lap record in every single heat. And, you know, eventually we'll go on to break the lap record in the final as well.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't him, you know, I think the gap back to the next guy was about 5 seconds. He was also on an Intrepid as well. Harrison Scott, he was also no slouch at all either. So, yeah, I look back on those memories and have definitely fond memories of it. It's a shame. Well, I say it's a shame, but obviously got signed on by Red Bull afterwards. It would have been good to keep going and maybe do another World Championship together.
Yeah.
And you know,
you left quite young. That is true.
Yeah. No, you know, looking back on only 3 years in karting, I do wish I had stayed a bit longer.
Yeah.
The first year was in the World Champ, second year was second. You look at it and you go, right, next year you're going to finish first, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I look back on that with very fond memories and learned a lot. And you know, even most recently now, obviously bringing you into work with the School of Senna drivers we've got, and I'm continually learning from you. So it's lovely that we've still kept connected over all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. But then just to go on with that little bit after, you know, my interaction with you in the second half of 2011, which was successful and very enjoyable. And, you know, first beginning to work in the Ricky Flynn awning as well, because that was a new experience too. And so in 2012, if I get it right, 12, 13 and 14, I was working inside Ricky's awning with the Force India boys. There were 3 Force India kids sent over, and all 3 of them for the first year, and then just Jehan Daravala for 2013 and 2014, and he did pretty well in the end. Yeah. He developed into a good driver, Jehan. We're still friends today, so I still talk to Jehan. Yeah. So that was it as far as, you know. You know, like on a regular yearly basis, I've helped quite a few kids since then, but not on a yearly basis. So.
Yeah, no, it's kind of amazing when you list some of those names, like obviously the people who are still around today. You know, Jehan, for example, just signed as a Red Bull Junior, is racing F2. But even when you go a bit further back, you've got, you know, McNish, Davidson, Ricky Christo. Again, maybe not someone necessarily well known by everyone, but within the motorsport community, people know just how quick he was. Mm-hmm. You know, if I said to you, right, you've gone from when you stopped racing to now, who's the best driver you've seen come through? Not necessarily who you've worked with, but you've looked trackside and gone, you know, even at my prime, I wouldn't have been able to beat them.
Oh, I don't know about that one. No, whatever. I think the best all-round driver that I saw that never went on to achieve great stuff in karting, I've already said, was Alessandro Zanardi.
Yeah,
he was an exceptionally good driver. There's some other special drivers as well. Stefano Modena was a real special driver, never won a world championship. And there's 3 kids that didn't win a world championship that were definitely capable of doing that and didn't. And one of them's Ayrton Senna, one of them's Alessandro Zanardi, and the other one's Stefano Modena. Yeah. They were 3 stunning, exceptional drivers, never won a world championship. And that was back when World Championships meant you were world champion. You know, like nowadays, I think we have about, I don't know, if you add up all the world champions knocking around the place, there's about 16 or something each year.
Yeah.
So that's very diluted now to call yourself a world champion. That was back when there was one world champion. Eventually, they had two. I don't even know why they did that, but they developed two world champions with Formula, you know, for Formula Super A and Formula A. But that diluted it as well. So that diluted the world championship. But back in the years when Zanardi and Modena, Mike Wilson, myself, those people were doing it, it was one world champion. That was from the whole world. So you really were the world champion. Yeah. But there we go. So, I mean, like I say, it's always hard to say one driver. I'm picking out Alessandro Zanardi because at the time, I thought he was a stunningly great driver, all-round driver, unbelievably fast, brilliant overtaker, all sorts of things like that. But there's been, you know, there's other kids that have been very good since then. But who knows how well he'd have done if he'd have gone on? You know, you never quite know. But he went to cars and ended up, you know, losing his legs in cars. So his direction took a bad turn there. And but like, as I say, you could see with him the determination and the dedication of the bloke after, when he's done so much since losing his legs, where, you know, other people would have folded at the time. And he's had an amazing life since then, you know, but based on his determination.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely a model for any young driver to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You talk back to that sort of era of karting. CIK come to you and go, right, Terry, you can change anything you want in modern karting. You know, fire away. What would be the thing that you change?
You mean today, as we talk today?
As we stand today, what would be the thing that you think would make karting more pure, a better sport? You know, anything. The CIK had come to you and said that. What would be the thing you change?
It would be connected with bodywork and front bumpers. The front bumper rule, I think, you know, I hate it. Yeah. I hate the front bumper rule. And the reason I hate it is, you know, they're saying that karting is not a contact sport. Well, it's not in one way, but in another way it is. And I can explain that. Yeah. If you actually look at the results of a final or a heat, anywhere where they print out the results, I'm thinking of PF, for instance. Yeah. The Paul Fletcher's track in the UK. If you look at the results after, say, the junior final, it's specific to junior. Well, it's mostly specific to junior, although it is across the seniors as well. But in the juniors, at the end of a wet race, at the end of a wet final, you'll see there's 32 or whatever in the final. You'll see 15 or 16 finishers. Then you'll see 15 or 16 people that have had a 5-second penalty because their bumper touched. Yeah. The bumper dropped down, they get a 5-second penalty. These are 15 people now that their weekend's ruined. Yeah. Their weekend, some of these guys were running first and second or fifth or sixth. And in the wet, occasionally, without deliberately trying to knock someone off, you do touch the cart in front. Yeah. That's enough to drop the bumper down. Not enough to, you know, these people aren't trying to knock people maliciously off the track. They're just racing cars, and they're trying not to touch the front bumpers, but it can't be helped almost in the way. So that's why I hate that rule. And there's been many other instances where people have been disqualified when the bumper got, you know, people, you know, brake testing on the run up to the scales. Yeah. And it's so open to abuse, the rule. Yeah. And the rule is actually there because they put the front bumper on to start with to make it look like a little racing car. What other reason could there be? I've no idea, because basically it was a battering ram. Yeah. Then they couldn't police that. Too many people got knocked off when it was fitted in a solid way. So they've had to make this other rule now with the drop-down bumper, which has its own set of problems as well. Yeah. Now, if there was no bumper on there at all at the front, we'd have none of these problems. Yeah. And people didn't used to damage their feet, or, you know, you didn't hear of a lot of people, you know, in hospital because they'd broken their feet because there was no. So that's not an argument. There just doesn't appear to be any other argument to have it on the front of a go-kart. Yeah. So that it would be something along those lines. I'd look at the bodywork rules again, because it hasn't helped karting in the last few years. It hasn't helped. Well, it's been around for quite a while. It hasn't helped karting. It hasn't improved karting. But I think it's made it worse for the reasons just mentioned, to be honest. So it'd be connected with the bodywork. A serious rethink of that rule.
Yeah, that's definitely I think quite a widespread opinion as well. Yeah, it's one of the things where if you put the part there, people are going to abuse it, unfortunately. And like you say, yeah, less than ideal that people do, but who knows where the direction of karting will go in the future. So, last two questions. First one, a very serious one. You've got a young karter there, lots of potential. I'm sure there's going to be lots of young drivers who are tuning into this because of who you are. What would be, that sort of piece of golden advice that you'd give a young guy who wants to be a world champion?
Oh, you keep asking these.
I love a hard to answer question. Why make it easy?
Like I told you what we did. We had a goal to be, to get to the very top, and we were very focused on that. I mean, if you've got a reasonable amount of ability, having said that, ability is not the number one ingredient to be successful. It helps, obviously, to have ability, inborn natural ability. It helps to have that. But none of us can choose how much of that we've got or how much we haven't got. But what you can do is develop what you have. And by the system of being honest with yourself, self-analysing everything you do, and then putting things right and improving on those things, you will find you move forward and you go better. And once you start to go better using that system of being self-analytical, changing things, improving things, therefore going better, you go better in your next race or your next outing. Instead of finishing 12th, you finish 7th or something. And that gives you the confidence to move on and move up. And it's adopting that system and not blaming your equipment and not blaming this. And so many times you hear, I went into the corner and he cut across in front of me, he drove in. No, you didn't, mate. You braked too late. You messed up. Be honest about it. Yeah. Find a way not to brake too late the next time. So you understand what I'm saying? They're always blaming other people. You hear it so often. And when you do that, you're bypassing where the problem is, and therefore you're not addressing the problem. And by not addressing the problem, you're not improving, you're not moving forward. Yeah. I would say develop a mindset and a way of thinking like that will be the thing that serves you best in any form of competition. It's not just karting. Yeah. You don't get, if you've got a runner or a hurdler, we're using technique. They analyse their technique. They look, that's what I'm doing wrong. How can I improve that? That's what you need to do, and not enough people do that in karting. Yeah. And also teams tend to influence that as well. So the better teams are the ones that learn by their mistakes and move forward. Yeah. You must know that from being in the karting teams you've been in. Yeah. And I'm sure but certainly the karting teams. Some teams they refuse to learn in a proper fashion and move forward in a proper fashion. Others don't. Others are good at doing that. But it's that mindset of being honest, addressing your weaknesses, improving your weaknesses. When you do that, you go better. When you go better, it enhances your confidence. When you enhance your confidence, you go better, and you're on the upward escalator. Yeah, not on the downward one. The downward one's full of people saying, "Oh, he cut in front of me. Oh, this happened. The brake didn't work properly." The down escalator is full of those people. Believe me.
Yeah, I suppose the nice thing about that bit of advice as well, it's something anyone can do.
Yeah,
it's really the choice to do it and go out and okay, this is the mindset I'm going to have. I'm going to be critical. I'm going to evaluate myself, and I'm going to make myself a better racing driver.
Yeah, it applies to all competition as well. It's not just karting. It applies to all forms of competition. So.
Yeah. Definitely. I think that's, definitely something that a lot of people probably need to hear and will be very grateful for. Last question, just to finish off. Probably the one I've always wanted to ask you more than anything else. Were you always born with a moustache? Or has there ever been a time where Terry hasn't had a moustache?
No, well, I'll tell you what, the reason I've got a moustache mostly is because when you're born and you're up in heaven and St. Peter or whoever it is giving out the bits and pieces, I was right at the front of the queue when he gave out the noses, so I got really quite a big, exceptionally sort of obvious nose. But when he gave out the lips, I was right at the back of the queue. He had these motley little pair of lips. He said, "That's all we got left, mate." So that's what I got. And so I've always grown a moustache to sort of really cover the fact that I haven't got a top lip.
Well, I didn't know that.
Quickly gaze at me, and they mistake the moustache for some kind of top lip. So.
Wow.
That's why I've got a moustache. It suits my face a little bit better than no moustache. I've also seemed to have a very long top lip as well with that. That seems to me. If I have shaved it off a couple of times, and I look awful with that.
Is it a high top lip though, or is it just a very well trimmed moustache? That's what.
No, it's a well trimmed moustache. I trimmed this bit here, yeah, and I trim along here. I trimmed it before this recording actually.
How did you know? It's trimmed your moustache.
Yeah, and I got my wife and all the bushes growing up my ears and all that to chase away any birds that were nesting, and so I've had quite a good trim up today actually.
Yeah. Well, you look the part. Thank you. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the insight and for the advice. And definitely won't be the last time we get you on for something like this with School of Senna. So
my pleasure.
Being our first guest.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it. My pleasure.